it is. Good. So thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us here. So yesterday you presented the 3C model for the cultural organization, and you talked about the cooperative culture. What is that? What does it mean for a company to have a cooperative culture?
Well, the first thing, I guess the best way to describe it is what culture is if a company isn't cooperative. So the great majority of businesses today are based around what I call collaborative model of work. And what that means is, among other things, it means that the organization is very tight. There's a lot of close connections between people, like the connection between a worker and their manager. In a cooperative business, things are looser. People have more connections. They're more connected to a wider range of people, but the connections themselves are looser. For example, the relationship that you have with a single person who's your boss, who does all of these things. He tells you what to do or helps you find productive things to work on and reviews you and gives you your pay increase and so on, and mentors you and teaches you the skills you might need to accomplish your job. Well, in a cooperative business, that might be a relationship with 6 different people, for example, none of which is as tight. You'd spend a sixth of your time with each of those 6 people instead of all that time that you spend with your boss. And we also find in collaborative work, there are a lot of situations where people are brought together in groups who work together for a long period of time, like a department. You have a lot of tight relationships there, whereas in a more cooperative company, you might work with a broader range of people over a period of time, working with more people, but working less with each of them. Mm-hmm. And so this is interesting because one of the things we know from social network theory or sociology or anthropology is when you're connected to more people, you are likely to find new things out at a higher rate of higher frequency than people that have only a smaller number of connections. And particularly when you have a loose connection with people, they're not people who are necessarily exactly like you. They're not people you went to school with necessarily or live in your neighborhood. And so they're likely to be connected to other groups and bring new ideas to you. And so as a result, we can anticipate, and one of the reasons why I believe that companies are going to switch to a more cooperative culture of work is that it will allow them to innovate more quickly. Companies that have lots of people who are more loosely connected with lots of other people will be exposed to new ideas, and because their connections are looser, it's easier, simpler, less stressful to develop new ways of delivering value to your customers or a new way to develop your products, because it's simpler, obviously, to make changes when there are less people involved in the thing you're changing, and they're less self-identified with the way that things are being done now, because they haven't been necessarily doing it for 17 years exactly that way.
But that has huge implications in terms, for instance, of management and performance appraisal, which are things that are so embedded in the way companies work. Because if you don't have one boss you report to, one manager you report to, and you start working more loosely with different people in the organization, who's evaluating your performance? What are the implications of how the institutionalized processes that we tend to see in companies?
Well, they'll become faster and looser too. I mean, the kinds of changes that we're envisioning are not, that we're talking about, are not things that companies are adopting because they think they're just a good idea. It's not a whim. It's not a fad. The reason that companies are moving increasingly to this fast and loose organizational mindset is because there's an intensification of competitive pressures in the world. And they find that being slow and tight puts them at a severe disadvantage. So in order to compete, you have to loosen up, you have to relax. We say in martial arts, you have to go slow to go fast. But what that really means is you have to relax your muscles so that your hands can move quickly or your feet can move quickly. And so the same thing has to happen in a business. To be able to move at a faster pace to keep up with a globalized world with increased competitive pressures, intensified competitive pressures, businesses have to relax. They have to allow more innovation to take place that's motivated by more autonomous people, more autonomous small groups. And then the rest of the business has to follow that, right? So that means, as usual, change will happen at the edge, and the core functions of the business, like HR and reporting and so on, will have to catch up. And so that is a place where you're going to have this dynamic tension, because the operating people, the people that are actually doing work, delivering value to the customers, building new products, they'll be innovating in this way because it's the only way you can speed things up. And as a result, everything else has to follow. That means everything else has to relax. And it'll be disruptive. It'll take a long time. It'll take a decade for the core functionality of the business to catch up with what's going on at the operating edge, where people are meeting customers or developing new products. That's so it's necessary for companies to become opportunity seeking and not risk averse. And there are going to be organizational people, certain roles in the organization that are naturally risk averse, and they will drag their heels and say, we can't do it that way, and let's hold on to the past or hold on to the present or whatever. But inevitably they'll get dragged into the future, just like they got dragged into the present before.
One of the trends that I noticed at the Enterprise 2.0 Summit in Paris is that they were saying, maybe 4 or 5 people in their presentations, they said that we need to have top management directing us and getting us to become social business and more engaged, connected internally, and we are seeing adoption from the low levels of the hierarchy, and the struggle is still middle managers, but we need to stop worrying about them, because if they're not on board of these things, they're out, or they will be feeling so left out of the action that they will want to be out. Is that how do you agree with that? Do you perceive that as well, that middle managers can become blockages, but at the same time we need to just ignore them? And
well, it's hard to think of middle management as a heterogeneous group of people. I mean, homogeneous group of people with very similar characteristics. I mean, they have some, because they have similar roles. Part of the transition here is a move from role-based business to more personal-based business, whole-based business, as the whole person comes to work, right? But I think a more functional way to think about it is, once again, going back to the model. And of course, the people listening to your video here can't see the picture, but
I'll show them the picture.
The notion is that you have a transition going on from this collaborative style to collective mindset kind of culture, where theoretically everyone's organized around a bunch of strategic principles that define what the business is supposed to be doing, and everybody buys into that, right? You get indoctrinated by your company, get trained, you've worked there for some period of time, you build up an understanding of what the culture is supposed to be about, because the culture is supposed to be doing something. The business is supposed to be heading in some direction, and everyone's supposed to be going in that direction together. In that kind of an organization, certain kind of archetypes, certain kinds of roles, certain kinds of psychosocial profiles do well. And the people that do well are promoted, so they become managers often, right? And what we're seeing is a transition from that kind of collective mindset and a long-term strategic vision of the business, and everyone rallying around that, and everyone walking together in lockstep, moving in the same direction, to a looser, kind of more cooperative organization where there's more autonomy, and it's faster and looser, as I say, as opposed to slow and tight, and a different set of profiles, a different set of archetypes do well in that organization. So one of the things we're going to see is either people are going to have to change their behaviors and become different archetypes and learn new skills. Some of the archetypes can be the same, like generalists. People are sort of general, they're good at work, they're a little bit competitive, but they're not too competitive. They're pretty self-directed, but they also can get along with the group. They sort of blend anywhere. Well, they'll do well in either of these worlds. But people that are incredibly, entrepreneurially competitive, very willful, sort of want to dominate and push people to do things, they're not going to fit in as well in a cooperative kind of a business culture as they do in a contemporary, kind of collective business culture, a more collaborative business culture. So people will either have to, as you said, they'll have to sort of get used to the new thing and accommodate it, or go work in a business that's remaining in that old mindset.
Okay. And what is the role of social tools? We've been here discussing or looking at different tools for this last couple of days. What is the role of that, both for the individual and for the organizations where the individual is working?
Well, it's a really fundamentally important issue, and the tools that we have today that are widely in use, the ones that are household names in our community, Yammer and Chatter, and Podio, and so on, are really designed around collaborative work, and that means it's primarily about groups. You get your responsibilities and abilities in those systems by being invited to a group. Then you have tight symmetric relationships with people in that group. If you don't get invited to groups, you don't have access to do anything. Like Podio, for example, we were talking last night, they don't have a mechanism for just following a person. You can't follow people in Podio. But cooperative work is going to be about social networks. So it's going to be, first, tools have to help individuals get their work done. All work is personal, ultimately. And then secondarily, we see the shift from push-based communications, group-based belonging as the primary mechanisms of thinking about work, to social network pull-based communications, where people choose who they follow as information sources. That's where I want to get information from. I'm interested in following these people, not specifically belonging to groups in order to get access to information. And that's a major transition that these tools aren't quite getting there yet. I mean, tools like Yammer, yes, you can follow people, but it's still largely organized around groups and group belonging. So we're seeing a couple of these tools have sort of an interesting hybrid model. A Zendu I just wrote about, for example, a French company, has some interesting ideas. But still, it's primarily based around collaborative work, groups, selling a product to the company, and they roll it out to people top down, right? Getting back to your question about the role of senior management, I think senior management is going to be very necessary in making this transition, but they'll be necessary in the sense of fostering the idea that the company has to relax, has to become more fast and loose, so that in fact you can speed up your ability to compete in the world. And in a sense, they might have to jump over current middle management structures in order to get there. Like the recent McKinsey survey said that, they interviewed all sorts of people who are CEOs, and once again, the CEO said, we're worried that our middle management isn't ready to, go through a digital transformation, go through this transition, so that we can get another round of productivity increase. It could be just a bias on the part of CEOs to want to blame somebody. But I do think we'll need to have some kind of push. While people still think about the organization as a pyramid, if we're going to move past the pyramid to the network, it's going to have to be people who are in charge of the pyramid who will make that happen, because it's not going to be a revolution, right? It will be slightly revolutionary. People at the edge will start naturally doing what they think is necessary to be successful, to get that next product breakthrough, to innovate, to succeed in the marketplace, or potentially just to decide that that's the way they want to work. But it will take some time. There'll be a lot of hiccups, and I think I'm expecting a rash of chief digital officers being appointed all across the world, whose job is to go through this transformation. At the end, their role may just disappear. They might become the new CEO, presiding over a networked organization, and saying goodbye to the old, pyramid.
Yeah.
And that could happen relatively quickly.
That's great. So thank you so much for your time and for your thoughts. Thank you.